Good morning, everybody. I see we've still got some people joining us, but thank you to everyone who's joined us promptly. We really appreciate your presence and participation in this morning's webinar. I thank you for joining us today. My name is Gabrielle Henry and I'm Executive Director of the Victorian Energy Upgrades program at the Essential Services Commission. I'm joined by my colleagues at the Commission who will co-present with me today. We've got a lot of information to share and we'll provide an outline of the main impacts of the changes on 1st of July this year and then open the floor for discussion. Next slide, thanks. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands on which we are respectively meeting today, and here where I am, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present and elders of other communities who may be joining us here today. Next slide. Today we'll run through some of the changes that came into effect last week on the 1st of July. That includes new fees, new accreditation standards and processes, and run through the new accreditation application form. There will also be an opportunity for questions. Next slide. But before we get started, just some housekeeping. You may have noticed a prompt letting you know that we'll be recording this session. I also just ask that everyone who's participating, please keep their microphones muted just to make sure everyone is able to hear clearly. There'll be an opportunity for questions after the presentation. If during the presentation you've got any questions, we ask you put them in the chat and we'll try to respond to as many as we can today. During the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar itself, you're also welcome to raise your hand if you would prefer to ask a question on camera. As I mentioned, we'll try to get to as many questions as we can, but if we can't get to your question, we'll be publishing a response to all questions on our website after the webinar for your reference. We've also developed both a fact sheet and frequently asked questions on the changes that can be already found on our website. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to hand over now to our Commissioner, Rebecca Billings, to say a few words.
Thank you, Gabrielle, and thank you and welcome to everyone. We're really pleased that you could join us today for this information session. With NAIDOC Week coming to a close just on Sunday, we continue to celebrate and recognise the history, culture and achievements of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. I would also like to acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first peoples and traditional owners and custodians of the land and waterways on which we live, learn and work. I honour and pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I am pleased to have this opportunity to join with you today and spend a few minutes talking about this fantastic program, why it is so important to all Victorians and how these changes from new accreditation processes and standards, new program fees, and strengthened functions and powers for the Essential Services Commission will enable the program to continue to deliver positive outcomes for consumers, industry and the environment. The Victorian Energy Upgrades program plays a key role in helping to achieve our state's emission reduction targets and our path to a net zero emissions economy by 2050. The program also encourages investment, employment and innovation in industries and fields that many of you represent. Industries that are involved in the design, supply and installation of energy efficient products and services. I am sure I am not alone in acknowledging and appreciating how important every effort is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our atmosphere and slow down global warming. Human-induced climate change represents significant economic, social and environmental challenges today and for generations to come. Adapting to energy efficient technologies and behaviours is one of the ways we must navigate living and responding to climate change. I, for one, am very proud to be working in this industry, and that is all about delivering environmental benefits to Victorians and improving our energy efficiency. The Energy Efficiency Program provides a real opportunity for households and small businesses to tangibly reduce their energy usage, contributing to the energy transition while at the same time lowering their own energy bills. Finding energy bill savings is always important to consumers and is no doubt part of the reason why the program has been so successful to date. With the impacts of higher wholesale energy prices now flowing through to consumer bills, finding those savings becomes ever more important to consumers. The Victorian Energy Upgrades program was established in 2009 and is the largest and most established energy efficiency scheme in Australia. More than 2 million households and 150,000 businesses have participated in the program to date, and it has contributed to a significant reduction in Victoria's greenhouse gas emissions and average annual bill savings. This is a remarkable achievement and shows that Victorian consumers believe in this program and support it. And that's why we are all here today, to work together to implement critical but positive changes to help the program go from strength to strength and set it up for continued success. The changes we are discussing today mean that new requirements for accredited providers and scheme participants and stronger regulations for their conduct. This will help the program to be best in class in terms of consumer experience and energy efficiency performance, so that Victorians continue to realise significant economic and environmental benefits through the program. And in seeing these benefits, Victorians will continue to believe in the program and support it. The Essential Services Commission's role in these changes is important. As well as supporting industry to understand and meet the new accreditation processes and standards, we will also have new powers to provide stronger protections for consumers and for accredited persons, helping to prevent and deter non-compliance with the program. For many years, the VEU program has been relatively straightforward, focused on reducing emissions by replacing old light bulbs with energy-efficient LED lights. Today, the program is growing and evolving to become more sophisticated and incorporate new technologies, while at the same time seeking to achieve even more ambitious program targets. The program is moving towards achieving emissions reductions by different means, such as replacing old, inefficient hot water systems with new energy-efficient heat pumps, as an example. Installation of more complex and expensive products, particularly those that consumers rely on for the delivery of essential services, introduces greater risk to the program, greater risk of consumer harm, and greater risk through non-compliance that the environmental benefits of products installed through the program may not be fully delivered. And Parliament has acted on this and has introduced legislation to help address this risk. It has raised the bar for businesses seeking to operate in the program, and it has significantly increased the Commission's roles and powers related to the program. This is important for growing consumer trust and delivering on the program's objectives of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The changes require that accredited persons must demonstrate they are fit and proper and competent and capable before the Commission will grant or approve renewal of applications for accreditation. We want the program to be the best it can be for all Victorians. That means making sure that businesses accredited to operate in the program can ably meet the new standards. This goes to the experience of consumers, the reputation of accredited persons, and the quality of products. I've got feedback. Can someone go on pause? Back on? Yes, thank you. This may require a significant overhaul of policies, procedures, practices, and cultures for some accredited persons. APs who don't meet these standards will not have their accreditation renewed by the Commission. For those of you who carefully abide by the rules, who treat consumers with respect, install products with care and skill, and are responsive to customer concerns, these new standards will be to your benefit. You will no longer have to compete with accredited persons who are cutting corners and who fail to abide by the Code of Conduct. So hopefully you'll hear some practical advice today from me and from the other speakers. So I'll start. We want to share some advice with you about how to renew your accreditation and how to approach your future in the program. So a couple of suggestions from me. Number one, we will be closely scrutinising applications from accredited persons, particularly from those who rely on consultants or other third parties to prepare their applications. We will interrogate closely whether your staff and contractors actually understand and can follow the protocols you purport to have in place. We will look closely at your history of interaction with us and our fellow regulators to consider whether your paperwork matches your practice. Number two, it is very important that you do not outsource your compliance culture. We expect employees to hold key compliance roles within your organisation. Compliance culture is signalled from the top. The directors set the tone, and the compliance culture is maintained by your leadership staff, down through to your junior staff and contractors. You are responsible for the compliance of every single employee and scheme participant in your ecosystem. Unless you can demonstrate a culture of compliance that exists within this ecosystem, the Commission cannot be satisfied that you are a fit and proper person to hold accreditation. Number three, save yourself time and money and work to get your applications right the first time. Make sure you have provided the necessary information and documents. If you cannot complete the application in full and upload all relevant documents, you will not be ready to apply. If you apply with incomplete applications and documents, your application may be refused. Number four, expect to see conditions on your accreditation. The Commission may impose conditions on accreditation to manage risks we perceive with applications and to ensure that the objectives of the program are met. And lastly, as you have already seen in recent months, the Commission has been exercising powers to suspend and revoke participants' accreditations. The Commission will not tolerate non-compliance that harms consumers and results in poor program outcomes. As of 1 July 23, the Commission has new enforcement tools, such as civil penalty litigation and the issuance of penalty notices. Our compliance and enforcement capability has grown, and you can expect to see us act more swiftly and utilise all of our enforcement powers. Some of you may find these changes daunting, but others of you will share my confidence that these program updates represent a fantastic opportunity for Victorian consumers and businesses to realise our carbon neutral future. Victoria must transition to energy efficient products to achieve net zero emissions. The importance of the VEU program to realise this outcome cannot be overstated. It is a privilege to become an accredited person and participate in the VEU program, and we make no apologies for raising the bar. We invite those of you who are committed to excellence to continue your journey in the VEU program. And with that, I will hand back to Gabrielle. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Billings. Moving on with our program, on the next slide, we're going to be talking today at the high level about changes that are part of a range of reforms to the program to strengthen the performance and reputation of participants and hence the scheme. And we would like to highlight 3 areas that will impact you all. There's a new fee schedule, and I'll go through that in a bit more detail in the next slide. There are also changes to the accreditation form to make it all-inclusive and more streamlined, and most notably the inclusion of information to demonstrate that the applicants are fit and proper persons and competent and capable. And finally, during the transition process to the new accreditation framework, all APs will be required to renew their accreditation, and we'll outline that process for renewal. Next slide, thanks. I'd like to provide an overview of the fee changes, and these were communicated to our stakeholders on the 30th of June. The current fee structure for the program hasn't been revised since the program began in 2009. The new fee structure from the 1st of July this year, and noting there'll be further revisions to fees that we expect to occur in November this year, will help resource the Commission to effectively exercise its functions and provide oversight of the program. You'll note that the application for accreditation fee has risen from $500 to $3,000. And there are now fees for a range of functions where there were no fees previously. And many of those are listed in that table there. Also, just of particular note, the certificate creation fee will be raised from November this year. For more information, we've got information that we previously published on our website about the fees. We will note that in determining the fee structure, the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action consulted with stakeholders throughout April this year, and further information about that consultation can be found on the Engage Victoria website. I'll now hand over to my colleague Stephanie Morrow, who will run through the accreditation form and informational requirements.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. It's lovely to be here this morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Stephanie Morrow, and I'm acting in the role of Director Regulatory Operations of the VU Division of the Commission. Because I'm acting, you won't see much of me from next Monday when Casper Mart is back and sitting in this role. But I'm here today, and I hope you'll bear with me. I have quite a lot to say today. I'm going to break my presentation into 2 parts. So the first part, I'm going to explain the new renewal process for accreditations. I'm going to outline some of the key legislative changes to accreditation that affect you as current accredited persons, and I'll talk you through our new process, which includes a new form that you're going to need to fill in for renewal, and also some new documentary evidence that you're going to be required to upload with that form. So that's quite a change from the current process for application, which some of you won't have been through for a very long time. Some of you were accredited a long time ago. So you may be a little rusty putting applications together. The second part of my presentation today is going to talk more in depth about 3 key concepts you're going to need to understand before you put your renewal application together. And those are, first of all, who is an officer or senior manager of your company, if you are a company. The second is who is a fit and proper person. And the third is who is a competent and capable person. So let's get straight into part 1, where we're talking about our new processes and new framework. Let's have a talk about 3 important legislative changes. You can see them on the slide here. I'm going to talk through each of them. The first is expiry of accreditation. The second is conditions, and the final one is tests that you are going to need to pass to have your accreditation renewed. So first, expiry dates. up until 1 July this year, accreditations under the VU program, as you know, were approved and then existed in perpetuity, which meant there was no expiry date. And unless you applied to exit the program or your accreditation was suspended or revoked, you were just an accredited person forevermore. So from 1st of July this year, each of your accreditations will now expire. And an accreditation, once it's renewed, lasts for 12 months. And each of you currently will have been given an expiry date for your existing accreditation. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So you are going to need to find out what your expiry date is for your accreditation if you haven't already. Now, because accreditations expire, there's now a renewal process that every accredited person has to go through if they want to remain in the VU program. Renewal applications are due at least 90 days before the expiry date of your accreditation. That's at least 90 days before, and we recommend that you put your renewal application through in the fortnight preceding that due date. The second important legislative change for accreditations is that from 1st of July this year, every new accreditation and every renewed accreditation will have conditions placed on it. The first condition you will see listed on your accreditation notice, unsurprisingly, will be a condition stating which prescribed activities you're allowed to undertake. But further conditions may also be applied as the Commission considers appropriate. I'll explain a little bit later that every applicant will be given an opportunity to consider and comment on any conditions that Commission staff think might be appropriate in your particular circumstances. And the third important legislative change is that at each renewal application going forward, an applicant must now satisfy the Commission that they are a fit and proper person and a competent and capable person before the Commission may accredit them. So that's a test that you're going to have to satisfy every 12 months as you seek renewal. These are really significant changes. So the Commission has developed a new renewal process, and we're going to have a look at that process now. So, Gabrielle mentioned that a key aspect of the accreditation reforms has been the development of a new and more streamlined, all-inclusive accreditation application form. So we received feedback from different APs that have pointed out that the currently numerous forms, about 8, is quite difficult to manage as an applicant. Of course, that makes sense. So we've listened to that feedback and we've created a single sequential form that you will use. It's the first form we've created. It may be updated as we receive feedback from you over time around how user-friendly it is, but we think we're pretty happy with it at the moment. It's a form that can be used by both new applicants and existing accredited persons who are renewing their accreditation. So we've removed what we think were the superfluous parts of that form. We've had to include a lot of new sections so that we can provide the Commission with all the relevant information to assess your fitness and whether you're a fit and proper person and a competent and capable person. But we think overall the form will be more efficient for you in terms of completing the form and keeping records. And part of making the form more sequential has been that we have split it into 2 parts. So when you open that form, you'll see that Part A is about general information applying to all accredited persons, and Part B relates to the specific activities that you wish to undertake. We've also ensured that information is provided about the scheme participants that support you in the creation and registration of certificates. So you'll now be asked to provide information to us about those scheme participants, who they are, where they're located, and how they're engaged by you. That helps the Commission to consider the appropriateness of the accreditation. And finally, to support you to understand the requirements of that form and the processes more generally, we have prepared an applicant's guide, which is available on the website. Now, there are some new evidentiary requirements. I think these may be on the next slide, Vibhuti. Yeah, thank you. So, there are definitely a lot more questions that you'll need to answer. We need much more information as a commission to decide whether you are eligible for accreditation from 1 July. So some of these new evidentiary requirements include you'll need to provide a detailed organisation chart. Well, that's not new, it already exists, but we will be using that to ask much more detailed questions about the way your business works. The other types of documentation are new, and you can see them listed here. So we're going to require key personnel resumes, probably just a list of the key skills, training and experience of each of your officers and senior managers is what we're after there. We're looking for contracts or contract templates with your scheme participants and employees. Looking for a statement of compliance with any accreditation conditions or restrictions that may have existed for you in the past, and a statement of prescribed activities undertaken in the previous 12 months. The clearer your picture, the picture you paint to the Commission regarding your expertise, skills, experience and qualifications, particularly of your senior management team, the better. It makes it more likely that your application will be assessed quickly, and the Commission will generally not approve applications when information or documents are missing. And that's because the law requires that the Commission reject any application where they are not satisfied that you are fit and proper and competent and capable. You could it may simply be because you have refused to provide the information that's needed to satisfy the Commission that you are those things. So we ask that you are as open and transparent as you can be. Now, if we have a look at the next slide, this is the new renewal 4-step process that you will each go through if you want to remain in the VEU program. So, you first need to identify when your accreditation expires. The Commission has declared an accreditation transition period from the 15th of October this year to the 14th of October next year. Each one of you has been assigned a date within this period on which your accreditation will expire. The dates of expiry of each of you is now published by the Commission on its website, and the Commission's also in the process of writing to each of you to let you know what that date is. Each of you must apply for renewal of your accreditation at least 90 days in advance of that expiry date. And what we ask is that you apply ideally sometime in that 2-week window finishing on the due date by which you should apply. That helps us to manage applications in a timely way. Applying too far in advance just means that we may be busy processing other applications and you might be asked to wait a little longer for your application to be processed. Now, it is important that you do apply by the due date. If you don't, that may result in your accreditation not being reviewed. So please don't miss that due date. It's very important. As Gabrielle has noted, there is now a renewal fee of $1,000, and that must be paid before your application will be assessed and progressed. You may also be asked to provide some further information if the Commission considers that it's required, or if staff think that the Commission may consider it required. And you may also find that you receive a procedural fairness letter. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then once the Commission has decided on your renewal, you will get a notice. That's a new notice. It hasn't existed before. You'll get a notice under the Act explaining noting whether you've been accepted for accreditation or refused, and listing all the conditions that will apply to your accreditation. So if we move to the next slide, please, for Booty, I want to quickly talk about procedural fairness. Conditions are new, and that may raise some concerns for you about what conditions might be imposed on your accreditation. The fit and proper person test is new. That may also raise some concerns for you. So I want to let you know that in everything the Commission does around decision making, we are compliant with the requirements of procedural fairness. And that means that if staff who are putting a briefing together for the Commission about your application think that there's a possibility the Commission might impose a condition on your accreditation that you haven't asked for, or if they think there's a possibility that the Commission might refuse your accreditation, or if they have some evidence that they think is relevant for the Commission to consider, but that evidence didn't come from you directly, all of those things will be put in writing to you in what we call a procedural fairness letter before staff draft their briefing to the Commission. And you will be given an opportunity to consider those things and to write back with your comments and thoughts about those things and provide any extra evidence or documentation that you think is warranted to reply to those things. Everything that you tell us will be included in staff and Commission consideration. So I hope that does put your mind at ease that everything we do is procedurally fair.
Steph, there's a question in the chat, and I think it would be helpful just to answer that now, just to bring this to life. Can you provide an example of a condition that might apply?
Yes, I can do. So there are probably two more obvious categories of condition that the Commission might think are necessary in particular circumstances. One of those types would be if we think about our prescribed activities, some of those have quite clear risks associated with them. And the Commission might like to include conditions which mitigate against those risks that are simply a result of the way that that particular prescribed activity is structured. One example might be that if you look at a relatively complex accredited prescribed activity, for example, a HERA assessment or perhaps installation of a hot water pump. These are relatively complex, and if you're going to do those those prescribed activities carefully and with due care and skill, then there's only a certain number that any one assessor or installer could perform in a day. So the Commission might like to consider whether they impose a condition saying that VEECs or certificates can only be created in relation to a certain number of those activities performed by an individual assessor or installer each day. That's the sort of thing staff anticipate they might recommend to the Commission. There's another type of condition that we might, as staff, recommend to the Commission, and that is that if we see an application from an accredited person where there's a worrying compliance history, conditions might be recommended so that rather than simply reject an application, the Commission might feel comfort that if they imposed conditions to act as kind of guardrails or safety rails for that particular applicant, they might still be able to satisfy the Commission that they are competent and capable of participating in the program as an accredited provider. There may be others that come to light as suitable conditions as we start working through these applications, but they're the main two categories that staff think are likely to arise.
Thanks, Steph, much appreciated.
No worries at all. Now, that brings me to the end of the first part of my presentation. I'm sure you're all very pleased. You're probably very sick of my voice. I'll try not to take too much longer. The second part of my presentation, I'm going to run us through 3 of the key concepts that are new and that you will need to understand when you're preparing for your renewal applications. And none of these concepts are new in terms of legal concepts, but they're new to our particular program. So the first concept I'm going to look at with you is who is an officer and senior manager of your company, if you are a company. The second is who is a fit and proper person. And the third is who is a competent and capable person. So let's look at this first question. Who is an officer and senior manager? Well, the reason that this is a question you're going to need to think about is because in the new form that you will be filling in when you're seeking renewal, as you heard me say earlier, you'll be asked to provide an org chart and to identify each of your officers and senior managers. And there are questions throughout the application form where you will have to provide answers for the applicant itself, a corporate entity applicant, but also you'll have to provide those answers for each officer and senior manager of that corporation. Now, for those of you who are sole traders, this isn't relevant for you, so bear with me. I'll try not to take too long, but most of our accredited persons, of course, are corporations, so you need to understand this. Section 9 of the Corporations Act defines officer of a corporation, and it includes the directors and company secretary of a corporation. It also includes persons who make or participate in making decisions that affect the whole or a substantial part of the business of a corporation. So that's not someone you'd necessarily automatically think of as an officer of your corporation, but the definition's quite broad. So sometimes you might have a senior officer or a person who coordinates the business of your company, and they're not a director, they're not a corporate secretary, but they have really significant influence in the decision making of your company, and they'll be caught within that definition of an officer. Another part of the definition is a person who has the capacity to significantly affect a corporation's financial standing, and a person who, in accordance with whose instructions or wishes the directors of a corporation are accustomed to act. So it's quite broad. And then a senior manager is what the Commission thinks of as an employee who falls outside that definition, but is still a key decision maker for the applicant's work within the VEU program. So this is broad, and it's broad for an important reason. When the Commission is thinking about whether you're fit and proper and whether you're competent and capable, the larger the corporation is, the more important it is that the Commission understands who are the key people making decisions, making sure that your training happens, making sure that you're up to date with changes in the law, with best practice, making sure that each of your contractors' work is done properly and so forth. So I think that's enough on that question. Let's move to fit and proper person. I'm sure you're all very interested in this particular one. So this concept is new for us, but it's existed in the law for a very long time. And Australian case law tells us that the concept of fit and proper person is very broad, just like it sounds. And the emphasis on when we look at the Australian case law for fit and proper person is, are you honest? Are you trustworthy? So let's have a look in detail about how this test is set out in our legislation, and then what other things we might consider, or the Commission might consider when they're considering whether you're fit and proper. So Section 11 of the VEET Act, subsection 3 here, which you've got on the slide, says that the Commission must refuse a person's application for the grant or renewal of accreditation if it's not satisfied that the applicant is a fit and proper person. for the purposes of accreditation, or if it's not satisfied that the person is a competent and capable person for the purposes of accreditation. So that means that actually the Commission is required to err on the side of caution. The law requires the Commission to err on the side of caution. If the documentation that you have provided doesn't satisfy the Commission that you meet those two tests, they must refuse the application. So this is why being generous with the information you provide, and as transparent and cooperative as you can, will work in your favour through this process. And just to emphasise this again, if the Commission thinks that you're probably fit and proper, or the Commission thinks that you're probably competent and capable, that's not enough. As a matter of law, the Commission must be satisfied of those things, and that's a high test. So let's have a look at the next part of section 11. So thank you, Vibhuti. So here we've got subsection 4. It says that in determining an application for the grant or renewal of accreditation, the Commission may have regard to any available information about the applicant's previous conduct in exercising powers and performing duties as an accredited person, and the prescribed activities undertaken by the applicant. That's no surprise. Of course, we'll be looking at your past conduct within the program. What may come as more of a surprise is what appears in section 10B of the Act. So can I get us onto the next slide, please? Now, this section says that in determining whether a person is a fit and proper person, the Commission may have regard to any relevant matter, including. So the list here, which I'll talk through with you, is what the Commission will consider in every case, but it's not an exclusive list, because the Commission may have regard to any relevant matter, and there will be matters outside of this list that are relevant, and we'll talk about those next. But let's first look at this list. So we've got a finding of guilt under the VEET Act and Regs, a finding of guilt within the last 10 years for an indictable offence, or an energy efficiency regime offence, or an offence which, if committed in Victoria, would constitute an indictable offence. It's a bit of a mouthful there. We've also got a finding of guilt for an offence involving dishonesty or fraud, and then a pending charge for any of the above. So if you have been charged, or if you have been notified by a regulator or police that they are investigating one of those types of offence, that also needs to be disclosed. Then we've got failure to comply with any provision of the VEET Act and regulations or conditions of accreditation, any improper or adverse conduct engaged in, including misleading, false or deceptive conduct, and a failure to disclose any of that to the Commission. Let's go to the next slide, please. Here we have the last few things in the list. So if the applicant has been accredited in an energy efficiency program before, you need to tell us about any suspension, revocation, cancellation or disqualification and the reasons. If you have held an account to hold, transfer and surrender certificates for an energy efficiency program, you need to tell us about any suspension, cancellation of the account and the reasons for that. You also need to tell us if the applicant has been an officer of an externally administered company under the Corps Act, and that will also apply to each of your officers and senior managers. That kind of information needs to be disclosed. Oh, everything that we're talking about here needs to be disclosed. And the final two things, a failure to comply with an order or decision made by a court, tribunal or the Commission, and a failure to disclose any of the above matters. So all of that is relevant and will be taken into account by the Commission when deciding whether you're a fit and proper person. Can I get to the next slide, please? Now, in addition to this, as I mentioned, the Commission will look at anything else that is relevant. And what the Australian case law tells us is that what's relevant is anything which can give us information about the applicant's honesty, because honesty is what's required to be a fit and proper person, or it's one of the things that is required. And honesty is to be assessed by looking at the conduct, character, and reputation of the applicant. As you know, there is a new requirement for each officer and senior manager to provide information about themselves, and that's supported by a requirement to supply a statutory declaration that the information is true and correct. Now, very, very importantly, criminal and compliance history is very sensitive, of course, and no one should feel concerned that disclosure of a criminal or compliance history will result in an automatic refusal of accreditation. It never will. The Commission exercises careful discretion and judgment on a case-by-case basis, and many things will be taken into account when a person discloses a criminal or compliance history to decide whether that person is an appropriate person for accreditation and fit and proper. But there certainly will never be an automatic refusal of accreditation based on something that is disclosed in a person's history. Could I move us to the next slide, please? All right. Final point I'm going to cover before we get to questions: competent and capable person test. So let's have a look at this one. Once again, when the Commission considers whether an applicant is competent and capable, it will consider the factors listed in the VEET Act, but it will also consider factors listed, talked about in the Australian case law. Because as I said, each of these concepts has existed for a long, long time. So we've got a lot of case law which tells us what is and isn't relevant to look at. Let's have a look at what the Act tells us first, and that's Section 10C. It says, in determining whether a person is competent and capable for the purposes of accreditation, the Commission may have regard to any matter, including the following. So we've got the skills and expertise of the person exercising powers and performing duties as an accredited person, including undertaking a prescribed activity. And the example provided in the Act is that the Commission may consider the skills and expertise of a body corporate as a whole, and as well as the skills and expertise of key personnel at the body corporate. So no one expects one single director, for example, to have all the skills that are required. The skills and expertise of key personnel will be taken into account when judging competence. The Commission will also consider whether the person has the appropriate licensing and regulatory approvals for undertaking a prescribed activity, and whether the person and any contractors or employees engaged by the person have appropriate professional accreditations for undertaking the prescribed activity or part of a prescribed activity that you are seeking accreditation for. That's all pretty straightforward. Can we move to the next slide? Here we have the other factors listed in the Act. So we're also looking at the past performance of the applicant, or whether the applicant has appropriate policies and practices in place, whether the applicant has complied with or incorporated any recommended practices for creating and executing contracts in accordance with the VEET Act or any VEET regulations and guidelines, and whether the person has complied with their CPD obligations. Now, that's not one you need to worry about just yet. In the future, the Commission may create some CPD obligations that you will need to comply with, but there aren't any at the moment. So you can not worry about that at the moment. And the Commission can prescribe other circumstances, but that hasn't been done as yet. So we can move to the next slide now. It might be useful at this point for me just to remind you what Commissioner Billings did say about policies and protocols drafted by third parties. The Commission is going to be looking really closely at those just to make sure that what's stated in that documentation is genuinely understood by relevant staff, and that the applicant's IT and other infrastructure supports delivery of those policies and protocols. So the Australian case law gives us a little bit of extra information about what the Commission will be looking for when they're considering whether you're competent and capable. In essence, the question is, can you, the applicant, with your officers, staff and contractors, do the work that must be done in compliance with the law, in line with best practice, with appropriate skill and knowledge? So that's the essence of what the Commission will be looking for here. And I'll just finish up now looking at the documentary proof required. So all accredited persons must provide us with a business plan or annual report with skills and experience listed, license and or activity accreditation registers, OH&S policies, organisational structures, lost time injury reports, workers' compensation reports, record keeping policies, training materials, code of conduct material, complaints policies, consumer data protection policies. Can we go over the page, please, for Booty? And then we have a second category of documentation that is required. And these documents are specific to particular prescribed activities. So we've got things like how you determine the eligibility of persons for particular prescribed activities, how you install and decommission. All those protocols are required. Your policies and processes for specific activities, including incorporation of relevant Australian and New Zealand standards, assignment forms, quality management and safety management assurance, and activity-specific training documentation. So that brings me to the end of my session. Thank you for your patience in sticking with me there, and I will just hand back now to our Executive Director, Gabrielle Henry.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that very comprehensive overview of our new accreditation requirements. We are anticipating that you might have some questions in relation to that content. I sort of see so far, it looks like we might have sort of one question. You can post any questions now that you have in the chat, and you're also welcome to raise your virtual hand if you would like to appear on camera to ask a question at this time. Just noting that any questions not answered in the session today will be addressed subsequently, and we'll publish all responses to questions that we've received in this session today on our website for your reference. So the first question that I can see in the that we've got in the chat is from Clement. So what's the impact, if any, of the assessment timelines for accreditation?
I'll try and answer that. Let me know, Clement, if I haven't answered you correctly, because I'm not 100% sure what you're asking, but I can tell you that there is a legislated time frame in which the Commission has to make a decision. So once you put your application in for renewal, a 20 business day time frame starts. Actually, I should clarify that. It really starts once you've paid the invoice. So that 20 business days does appear on paper to be a really sharp turnaround, particularly when you consider what I said about how we will give you an opportunity in a procedural fairness letter to respond to any of our concerns. So there are actually a couple of provisions in the Act which help us there to make sure that we have enough time in complex matters. If the Commission seeks further information from you to support the application, the 20 business day clock will stop until we get the information from you. And then And the procedural fairness letter, because it's essentially us asking you for information, asking you for your opinions and so forth, that will also stop the clock. So any request for information stops the clock. The moment you respond, the clock starts again. And there's another mechanism too, if we need it. The parties, as in the Commission and the applicant, can, if they need to, agree with consent to extend that time frame. So that if you ever want to ask for more time, you can do that and the Commission may consent to that. Or if the Commission feels it needs some more time, it may reach out to you and ask if you would consent to an extension of time. Does that answer your question, Clement?
Hopefully, yes. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Carmel Bourdignon. She heads up our Strategic Communications Division, and she's going to help field the questions, which I'm happy to see are starting to come in now. Thank you, Carmel.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Good morning, everyone. And Gabrielle was doing my job very well just then. Nice to see you all. I see a few popping up in the chat, and I can see also Martin, you've got your hands raised. So we might go to Martin first and then followed by Tim. And I can see a question then by Eco Asset Manager. So I'll read those out, but over to you. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, I've got a question. I think Stephanie mentioned that the time frame for the expiration of the accreditations will commence from October this year. And once the AP has received notification of that, at what point will he have, or how many days? I believe it's 90 days until he lodges a renewal application. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my understanding, and please step in, Gabrielle, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that so we've got kind of a calendar which you'll be able to see where your expiry date is. The first expiry dates are at the very end of January. So if my maths is correct, if you're in that first batch and your expiry date is end of Jan, you will need, your due date will be end of October. So so we think that should provide ample time for the APs. Even if you're in that very first batch, you've got until the end of October to prepare your documentation and that application form. Does that answer your question, Martin?
Yeah. So, well, I suppose, the ongoing question with that is, when will we know who is in that first batch, and when will we receive that information?
I think that information may have already been published, and that there is a link in the chat. Let me have a look.
That's correct, Stephanie. Matthew Douglas posted
yes.
it. The link to the list of accreditation expiry dates is here. So hopefully, Martin, you can click on that link.
At 10:22. Yep. So you should be able to find yourself in there.
And individual letters to each AP are going to be sent out as well. That's correct, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Yep, no problem. Thanks for that.
No worries.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Steph. Our next question is from Tim, and I'll just read it out to the group. Do we know when the new activities are going to come into the VEU, for example, HWS? And I'll hand that one over to Gabrielle, and maybe if you could also explain what HWS is, in case some of us on the call are not familiar with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmel. I'm hoping it might be around hot water systems, but apologies if I've got the three-letter acronym wrong in this instance. And I presume you're talking about the new activities. We'll put them under what's called a sort of electrification umbrella that came into the program effective from the 31st of May. There was a range of new activities promoting electrification in areas such as water heating and space heating and cooling, and we published those changes on our website and made updates to our respective guides and application forms. if you're asking when they're really going to start to get underway in the market, one of the barriers that we've noticed is we don't have products currently listed on the register of products for those activities, and that's kind of really up to you guys. We need the APs, we need the manufacturers to apply to us to have those products listed on the register of products, noting that the requirements might be, in some cases, they're slightly different to the requirements in terms of sort of evidence or eligibility compared to similar activities. So we would very much welcome applications so that we can start getting that those products on our register of products, and noting for anyone who's applied already, we're actively working through those applications as we speak. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Next question in the chat is from Eco Assets Manager. The competency test mandates compliance with CPDs, which imposes certain restrictions relating to telemarketing. Was wondering whether phone audits would be governed by the same regulations. Would it then be a requirement to secure telephone numbers from consumers not on the Do Not Call register in order to conduct phone audits? Is it one for Steph maybe, or if you've got any questions you need for clarifying that question?
Yeah, I'll try my best. Whoever posted that, feel free to just clarify that for me, because I'm not 100% sure what the question is. So in relation to CPD, so that's continuing professional development, there is a requirement in the competent and capable test that we read out together in that section 10C, which says that if there are CPD requirements, you need to tell the Commission in your renewal application that how you have met those CPD requirements. But as I mentioned, there aren't any current CPD requirements. It's up to the Commission to create those requirements, and it hasn't done that just yet. There has been an announcement from the Minister for Energy that telemarketing will be banned in the program. We don't know what that ban will look like yet. The consultation period is currently open, so I can't give you, unfortunately, can't give you any steer on how that's likely to be framed. If you've got a further question or you wanted to clarify, just feel free to do that and I'll answer as best I can.
Thank you, Steph. Next question in the chat is from Abdul. Do we get the expiry date of current accreditation in email or by post? And when can we expect those? I think it looks like it's sent by both letters. Will start be going out very shortly, so you could expect those shortly. Sorry, Gabrielle.
That's right. I was just going to say, obviously, we've posted information on our website so that information is available, but we will be sending out individual notifications by email and by the old-fashioned post or snail mail. So we're working on that, and they'll be sort of rolled out in due course.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Next question in the chat is from Patrick Blaine. With regard to the new fees, on a practical matter, how will these be invoiced? Will we need to make payments through the portal, or will they be invoiced externally as the VEEC registration fees are? How frequently will invoices be issued? How are payments acknowledged and tracked to avoid any delays?
There's quite a bit in that question. I think I might take that one if that's okay. Just noting that obviously there have been quite a few changes to the fees, and previously we had a very simple fee structure that we've got a number of new fees that we need to incorporate into our processes. We're working to automate and integrate those fees in terms of the issuance and invoicing with our current online IT registry system. Some of them are manual in the meantime, particularly those ones which may be charged a little bit less regularly, but we're working to automate as much as that as we can, sort of by November. Some of them are already included in the IT system, so do bear with us until everything is automated, but we do have manual processes in the interim so that we can issue those invoices and manage them effectively.
Thank you, Gabrielle. I think the next question from Akshay might be one for Gabrielle as well. Is there any fee for additional activities applications with accredited persons already accredited for other activities? Maybe one for Steph.
I'm happy to try and answer. My understanding is that there won't be a fee until you have transitioned to the new accreditation system, so to speak. And at that stage, those applications will be made as what's called a variation application in the legislation, and a variation fee will apply to those applications.
Great. Thank you, Steph. The next question is from Lee Simpson in the chat. Is the Commission able to outline the assessment framework of documentation versus operations, what it looks like and how it will be applied? The intent is understood and makes sense. However, given there is a large degree of subjectivity, this may present some challenges, ambiguity for both participants and the Commission. For example, will this be via a series of interviews or another method of investigation from the Commission? Some detail around this may support a smoother process for accredited persons and the Commission.
Hi, Lee. I'll answer that question as best I can. At this stage, we don't anticipate using interviews as a regular tool for assessing these applications. At this stage, we expect that the assessment will be done on the papers. So I understand that can be tricky, particularly for smaller accredited persons who don't necessarily have all of their procedures and so forth written down. The expectation will nonetheless be that those procedures and policies and so forth will be written down, at least for the purposes of these applications. If there are people in the room who think that might present some difficulty, I suppose there's always the possibility that you could ask the Commission if a different format might be appropriate in your particular circumstances, but it's not something that we had anticipated accommodating. We really were working with the understanding that this would be a really documentary evidence-based assessment process.
Thanks for that, Steph. And now, next question in the chat from Marthon is regarding, and sorry, my glasses aren't strong enough to see the little snippet you've posted, but regarding the prohibition of dual benefits, when is this to be implemented, and is it the activity date of the upgrade to be considered?
Sure, and this is, I think this is going back to some of the sort of previous changes that we had announced. I was hoping we had one of my team online who might be able to sort of answer that question. Sorry, I didn't have notes on notes on that, but from the start of the legislative changes, it applies from the activity date. We can provide any further sort of certainty, and I'll just sort of open if any of my colleagues want to add any further granularity to that.
Hi, Maureen. I think you're speaking, but you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, just to emphasize what Gabrielle said, so the prohibition of dual benefits applied from the commencement of activity 44, which is basically what we're talking about, the commercial industrial heat pump water heaters. So that was prohibition that existed in the legislation from the start of the activity.
And that's right. And just to clarify that, you know, that requirement, the changes that we made to our guidance were really just for completeness. We were just reflecting what the existing requirements were under the legislative and regulatory framework. It was just that we hadn't repeated those obligations under our guidance, sort of to be helpful, so that we just sort of did that to make sure that you're aware of that existing obligation.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Thanks, Maureen. Our next question is from Jane. Do product applications also have 20 working days to Apologies. Was I on mute then? I think I automatically muted. Sorry, I will try that again. That's from Jane. Do product applications also have 20 working days to be approved?
I can pop in and answer that. In terms of the legislation, no, there is no timeframe for product applications. Essentially, what the Commission does is it conducts thorough checks, and sometimes that does take time. I know that you're all too aware of that if you're putting these applications through, but it's really important that we get that front end of the program right, so we avoid problems down the track of potential consumer harm or safety issues and needing to remove products from the register. And of course, we prioritise the products that we think are most urgently needed on that product register. But there's no statutory timeframe the way there is for these accreditation applications.
And I will just note, just sort of a timely reminder again, that a complete and accurate and eligible application is a quick application for us to approve. It's where we find gaps and we need to ask for further information and send that back to with requests for further information, that adds to the timeline. So it's helpful for us if you make sure that everything is complete and accurate and compliant when you submit it to us. That helps us with our processing timelines.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Thanks, Stephanie. Our next question is from Banu. APNRG7, regarding products for activity 3C, isn't the products listed in activity 1D will be automatically listed 3C as they are similar type activities and products? We need to come back on that one. Let me know. Maureen's popped up.
Sorry, Carmel. I think I'm happy to take that. I believe what Banu is asking is, given that products already previously approved on activity 1D, the issue is those new specifications require products to be approved under the new standard in order to be installed under 3C. So that's why products need to be reapplied using the new standard in order to be eligible for installation under 3C.
Thank you, Maureen. Moving down the list, I think we're coming to our second last question. This is from Energy Saver Plus. Hi, team. With a large number of products already submitted and still pending assessment, would you have an indication as to the approval timelines, please?
I don't have a current status of approval timelines. I do appreciate your question and thank you for your patience. We are looking very actively at how we can streamline our applications. You will understand we have released some information to the market about sort of some of our concerns around sort of the quality of sort of installations around sort of hot water heat pumps. And as a result of that, we're obviously really keen to make sure that the products themselves are really eligible under the eligibility criteria, and make sure that we've got a really robust process for assessing those applications as they come in. We have a number of, as I've mentioned before, under the new activities, we've got a number of applications that we're currently assessing, and we're looking at how we can best streamline those to make sure that we can complete the applications to get them listed on the register. I will note that quite a number of those are currently back with the applicant under requests for further information, but we're processing those as efficiently as we can that are complete and accurate and compliant.
Thank you, Gabrielle. And then Martin, I can see you've got your hand up. We might just quickly go to Lucas first, who's been waiting for a little while. Then we'll do Martin and then Eco Assets Manager. And then if there's no other questions, we might move on to closing remarks. So if you've got any other questions, now's a good time to pop them in the chat or raise your hand just before we wrap up. So I'll just read out the one from Lucas. As the reaccreditation process shall be extensive, when will APs be able to consider the worth of remaining in the program by what is on offer in terms of updated timelines regarding new activities?
That's really a policy question for the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action in terms of when new activities are introduced. Obviously, if it's a commercial decision, looking at your businesses going forward, that's a matter sort of for you, but any announcement around new activities and the development of those is under the remit of the department. I see we've got Andrew Rothberg as member and representative of our colleagues over at the department. Were you wanting to provide a response there, Andrew?
Oh, look, I was just going to add that on our website, and I'll put a link in the chat, we do have a forward plan of new activities that we will be publishing in the next short to medium term. It should be towards the end of July or August, so that is to be updated. And I'll just find that link.
Thanks, Andrew. We'll wait for it to pop up in the chat, and in the meantime, I'll hand over to Martin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, just one question in relation to possible accreditation conditions. Would one of the conditions that could be a possibility that an AP may have a certain volume of VEECs that he may only be able to create? And secondly, are you guys considering possibly implementing a similar compliance regime such as New South Wales, where APs are independently audited based on volumetric numbers?
I can probably answer that for you, Martin. In relation to your first question, no, that sort of condition has not been contemplated, and I can't imagine a situation in which we would contemplate such a condition. Yeah, I can't. No. So just a no for the first one. Secondly, we have, under the new legislation from 1 July, and this touches on Jane's question as well, actually. Oh no, sorry, not Jane's, but Eco Assets Manager has put in a question about audits as well, so I might deal with these together. So from 1 July, the Commission is required to conduct assurance audits, and it also has a power to undertake compliance audits. Now, the assurance audits must be undertaken at least once in every 24-month period for every AP in the program, and they are always conducted by an independent auditor. So what I'm not familiar with the way that the New South Wales IPART decides who it audits, but what you've described sounds like exactly the sort of thing we will be doing, which is in essence a risk-based approach to identifying who needs to be audited under that assurance audit program and what the scope of that audit ought to be. So the higher risk the AP appears to be and the greater concern that the Commission has about that IP, then the greater the scope, the more detailed the assurance audit will be required to be. So yes, if New South Wales IPART is using a risk-based approach, we certainly will be doing the same. Whether we identify risk in the same way, probably not identical. I doubt that very much. They're different programs, but it will be similar. In relation to Eco Assets Manager's question, details about the new auditing framework and will they be incorporated into the applications for renewal? Yes, they will. So I've just identified that we've got these two new types of audit. The assurance audit, which must be done at least once every 2 years by an independent auditor. The findings and the reports and recommendations that fall out of those assurance audits will certainly inform the renewal applications and the treatment of those applications. It's possible that we may refine our renewal form going forward once we've started getting those assurance audits underway, so that your answers to some of those questions may simply be, you can say refer to the assurance audit report where those matters have been covered. So hopefully that will lift some of the burden of renewal applications. But most certainly that is an essential tool that will be used to help the Commission assess renewal applications. The compliance audits are a different beast. Yes, any kind of compliance action or enforcement action taken by the Commission is going to be taken into account when the Commission assesses your renewal applications. And those compliance audits are, I think of them as another type of compliance enforcement tool because we conduct them when we have a concern that misconduct might have occurred. I hope that answers your question on that topic.
Yeah, it does. And just a quick follow-up on that, which is another situation in an AP's business structure is, and hopefully that doesn't happen to anyone, but assuming someone does not get reaccredited, what would happen to their VEET account? So if someone's not reaccredited, would their VEET account also be suspended, or would that VEET account still be able to be used for trading purposes?
Well, there are other people better placed than me to answer this one. I'll give you my my rudimentary understanding and people can jump in to add to this answer. So from the 1st of November, we will start a transition period to introduce what's going to be called a VEET registry account. And that is an account that you will need to hold if you wish to hold and trade certificates. So you don't need to be an accredited person to have one of those VEET registry accounts. So whether there are consequences for a person's accreditation not being renewed in terms of their ability to maintain that VEET registry account, I don't know, but I suspect they're treated separately. So if anyone has some further information on that, please feel free to jump in. No, maybe that's an adequate answer. Maybe I've got it spot on.
Thanks, Steph. Thanks, Martin and Eco Assets Manager. So we've got time for our final 2 questions. And again, you can always ask the team questions. We'll have the contact numbers and email addresses at the end of the presentation. So do feel free to get in touch if you have any follow-ups. The next question in the chat is from Jane. The cost barrier of entry to register products will contribute to provide a lack of choice for consumers. This will also reduce manufacturers utilising new technologies and efficiencies. Will this be looked at again, as this will kill choice for consumers?
I will just mention that the fees structure was subject to consultation by the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, that they considered the response to consultation in the setting of the final fees. I will note that obviously we're moving to a different structure where previously the product applications had essentially been free of charge to applicants. One of the things that we did notice as part of that was that we got a kind of situation which I'll call in short form catalogue dumping, where we might have an applicant essentially saying, we just want you to approve all the products in the range. Obviously, we need to consider all of the evidence provided to us, and for applications with a nomination, we sort of look at those and register those on our register of products. Now, many of those products were never installed under the program, so we're really keen to make sure that, obviously in line with consumer expectations and market drivers, that we are assessing and approving a targeted list of products that we will expect are installed under the program, and we're hoping that the introduction of the fees will help with some of the decision making about which products are most suitable for installation under the program.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Our next question is from Trudy. Independent auditor to be selected from accredited order list and funded by the AP. Anyone's got an answer for that one?
I can answer that. Yes, you're quite right. The legislation requires that they are paid by the AP. As for whether they will need to be chosen from our list, at this stage, generally our approach is that no, they don't need to be chosen from our list. However, the AP will need to nominate an auditor, and the Commission, if they're not satisfied that that particular auditor has the requisite skills and knowledge to undertake the audit competently, can reject the nomination. So certainly choosing someone from our approved list of auditors is preferred, because we're satisfied that they understand the Act, the regs and the guidelines. But at this stage, we're not anticipating limiting assurance audits to just those on our panel.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Trudy. And our final question, because I saw everyone got the 5 minutes remaining Teams note. We know everyone's got a busy day to get on with. So this one is from Lucas. If your renewal time, isn't late until later next year, and you wish to gain accreditation for HERA, etc., shall we just apply as per normal for now? And maybe Gabrielle can end on that one, and then we'll hand over to Gabrielle for closing remarks. Thanks, Gabrielle.
I think that, we've obviously released a number of areas of guidance and information, and I urge you to look at those closely in considering your accreditation requirements. I don't wish to speak here on any particular circumstances that an AP might find themselves in terms of any particular business drivers, but I just urge you to follow, obviously, the information that we've provided on our guidance and our transition arrangements. Obviously we will, as we've mentioned in the presentation today, that we have a time frame that we need to consider applications sort of for accreditation. So yeah, that's probably all I'm going to say on this topic at the moment.
Thank you, Gabrielle, and thank you everyone for all of your questions this morning. Some really useful questions and information shared there. That brings us to the end. As I said before, please do feel free to get in touch with the team via the VEU contact numbers at any point if you've got follow-up questions. The video and the Q&As will be made available on the website as well in case you missed it or you want to go back and have a look at some of the answers. We really appreciate your participation this morning, and I'll hand over to Gabrielle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carmel, for facilitating, and thank you so much to all of our participants for your very helpful questions today. I hope everyone found it an informative session, and I encourage you all to have a look at the range of documents we have available published on our website, which provide more detailed information about the changes. We're here to support you through these changes, and we'll continue to communicate with you in the coming months. And on our final slide, we've just got listed our contact information, so you can get in touch with us if you've got any questions. But in the interest in finishing on time, thank you so much, everyone, for your time, attention and contribution today. Thank you, and we look forward to engaging with you further in the program as we continue through these reforms. Thank you so much, everybody.